Rimmy, welcome to the Faces of Façades, and thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
This is really a conversation about your journey, the industry, and the people behind it. So I always like to start at the beginning. So before WSP, before Façade Engineering, and before the leadership roles, where did your story actually start?
Well, started in an architecture college in India. I'm an architect by academic background. Started my practice in India like for a couple of years. Was working with a small architecture practice, and then gradually was trying to do a bit of facade design there, and then was sort of motivated to do more like sort of design facade with like a purpose. And then that's how I sort of tried to investigate like if there's a master's program which I could use and maybe enhance my knowledge.
Hmm.
And I found University of Bath at that time in 2008. I came here in the UK and just did the master's in facade engineering then and didn't look back since then.
So your life started in India in architecture, and you moved to the UK in 2008?
2008, yeah, that
Yeah.
was when I moved here.
So take me back to that point in your life. What was the plan? What did you think your career would become?
Well, I think it was a bad timing. 2008 was the worst global recession. And yeah, when I came here, I was studying full time. And I was, I had an aspiration to, sort of work with a practice when I graduate in a year's time. And yeah, that was something, everybody was like worried because
Hmm.
of the job. There was no job, there was nothing at all. And so I just thought, okay, let's settle in this year, 2008. Let's finish the master's program and then worry about for hunting job later. And 2009 came very quick. The year, finished very quickly. I remember when I finished my master's, like I submitted my dissertation, and the next day I was in London, packed my bags, came out of Bath, and I was sort of I looked for accommodation in London, started looking for jobs. There was nothing, hardly any vacancy, neither in architects, not in facade consultancies. And back then I didn't know many people in the industry, and I didn't have a professional network to build. So yeah, it was an intimidating period. But then I just thought maybe I could probably try to speak to people, try to
Hmm.
make my network. And I started ringing like head of facade engineering
Hmm.
consultancies. Like I think I remember speaking to Graham Fairley
Hmm.
and Will Stevens, who was at Ramble at that time.
Hmm.
Steve Bosey, he was at WSP. And yeah, so I tried to ring them and said, can I meet you? I'm even willing to work voluntarily, like for no
Hmm.
money. So yeah, that was like a challenging period. But I think when I spoke to these guys, each one gave me a different insight. And I remember I rang Will, and Will may not remember this, but I do. That he said, this is really hard time. There's no jobs, etc. Why don't you look to work for facade contractors? And I said, yeah, that's a good idea. But I've been an architect, and obviously in a consulting environment.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'll give it a go.
Hmm.
So yeah, and then I started applying to facade contractors and found a job with Stanmore.
Hmm.
It's like a facade contractor
Hmm.
based in East London,
Hmm.
Erith at that time.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I found my job there, the first one in the UK in a facade world. Like,
So you gave it a go.
yeah, I did, yeah, and
Yeah.
I think it played well.
How big a decision was moving countries at that stage of your
Well,
career?
Well, it was again quite difficult one because I was settled in the practice, like I worked there for 2 years in the architecture practice, and the career was like sort of jumping well at
Hmm.
that time. But then I decided to do this master's program, which meant
Hmm.
stopping to work and starting to study and moving into a new country where I didn't have any family, no one at all. I just had a few friends. Like my current husband was there, so yeah, he was there, and there was no one. And I've always lived with family. Like I was living with my parents in India back then, and you won't believe they were literally looking after me like you know a child. And yeah, it was quite daunting because I
Hmm.
had to do everything from scratch myself in a new country, new house, bills, cooking and everything else. So everything was thrown in, and but I made that choice myself.
So you've come from a very family orientated background, living in India, and now you're thrown into the big wide world in the UK. I mean, looking back, how important a step was that for you?
I think it was at that time, I didn't think it was going to be that difficult. I was just thinking, oh yeah, it's just a year of studies, and if things don't work out, I'll probably be back. I'll go back in the practice and I'll start working. I didn't realize at that point that that will never happen, that I will never go back. And and I when I came here, obviously there were signs that there was not much happening in the UK, so it wasn't really encouraging that it will be a long-term move.
Was architecture always something that you wanted to do?
No.
Okay.
So I wanted to do fashion designing.
Right.
Yeah, so I
Slightly
used to
different.
do slightly different, but more like similar creativity,
Yes, I get it.
So I gave an exam for that, after my A levels, which is like, year 12 in India. So I gave exams, but I didn't get through in the fashion designing course, but I got through architecture,
Right.
surprisingly.
Okay.
So I just ended up in architecture, and at that time it was like still is probably 5 years plus program. So
Right.
I got into an architectural university, did the 5 years bachelor's in architecture program, and it was quite a long period. But I didn't want to be an architect in the first place, but I
But,
just
but I guess
happened.
it appealed to your creative side, maybe.
Perhaps, yeah.
But what is it about buildings and design that interested you to go into that?
I think generally, when you are sort of in this creative environment, you want to create something tangible. Like, you should see at the end of your design process, you see something being built, whether it's a dress or whether it's a building. So I think the end product is what appeals, us in this industry. And now, especially facade engineering, yeah, I'm not damning other disciplines or in any way, or not disrespecting them. Everybody has an input to do, but what you look in a building is the facade. The first thing you look at it is what you see on the outside.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
if you could speak to the version of yourself arriving in the UK in 2008, what would you say to her?
Yeah, I would say, don't be afraid to take risk, and don't plan too further ahead, because your life is going to change in ways you haven't even thought of.
Okay. So you trained as an architect, but eventually you found your way into this very specialist world of facade engineering. So how did that happen?
As I said, I came here to do the specialization in facade engineering, and that was a 1-year program. And yeah, I just packed my bags, left, resigned from my job, and just came to this country, started this program in Bath, which was, again, when you look at UK, people always think London is the magnet.
Yes.
But so I was not in London. I was in a small city. Bath is a very small city. I don't know if you've been there. So I went there, and you could literally navigate the whole city in a day. So when I went there, it was quite different, because I've always lived in a city. Like, I was in New Delhi
Right.
at that time, and it was major city.
Yeah.
So
The
it
hustle
felt
and
like,
bustle. Yeah.
hustle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I sort of missed the hustle and the bus
Yeah.
in Bath, and I felt like it's quite
Slower pace.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's different. People do not have any rush to go anywhere, and they were actually very polite. They would speak to you. Let's say if you're traveling on a bus, or or if you see on the street, they'll say hello to you,
Right.
which doesn't happen in London, ironically. But it did happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a nice change from a big city environment. But yeah, I studied there, and then, as I said, I packed my bag the day I finished the course, and then I started looking for jobs. And
Okay.
then Will's suggestion
Yes.
for working into facade contracting sort of was my route into the facades.
Right.
But yeah, gradually you work with like Lindner Facades as well at that time. And then Steve Bosey, who was the head of facade engineering then, he rang me one day, and because I met him in 2009 when I graduated, he said, I do not have a job for you now, but if I will definitely get in touch with you. And he got in touch with me 4 years later in 2013, and he said, I have a job for you. And it just happened then that I joined WSP and never changed from there.
So you've been at WSP now since 2013.
That's right, 13
Okay.
years now.
So what makes facade engineering different from other parts of the built environment?
Again, facade engineering is the cusp of all the other decisions which are made on the the project environment, even though facade is just the outside skin of the building, but it communicates with everybody, structures, M&E, acoustics, fire, you name it. And then now sustainability is another aspect which is sort of linked with it. So so it is sort of a multifaceted profession. And what I see is you do not need to be an expert at everything, but need to have an appreciation of all the subjects, so that you can design the skin of the building to perform as it should.
Okay. I mean, almost everyone I speak to says they found the industry by accident.
Well, yeah, same in my case, yeah.
Right. So why do you think such an important profession is still relatively unknown?
I think it's the lack of structured education is the main reason behind it. Most of the people in the industry have come from other disciplines. Like I'm personally, like as an architect, I've sort of came in because of my interest in facade engineering, probably facade design more than engineering. But then I ended up here. Some of people who work with me in the team are structural engineers, and they were sort of like given something to do for facade, and they really liked it, and they just ended up moving the camps. Some are like people with knowledge of materials. They have like an inclination of learning about how materials behave, etc. So so they just come by accident because there's no structured education program. Like architecture is quite structured. You have a number of modules which you do, and then structural engineering as well. But facade engineering is not taught at a bachelor's level. The only course which I knew at that time, and probably still is one of the main ones, is the one which CWCT does at that time at Bath, but now in Bristol, in UE. So yeah, that is one of the main reasons. And then people just because there's so much variety of the work we do. Like no day is the same. In my last 13 years at WSP, not a single day has been the same learning. It has been something new, something different, and each project brings a different sort of learning with it. So I think people just like that variety of work, and then end up as facade engineers without an academic structured training in it.
It's often described as the perfect blend of architecture and engineering, but the universities don't seem to push people in that direction and offer it as a map for your career. Maybe that needs to change.
Yeah, and I think we are trying to, create more awareness with my involvement with SFE and CWCT. We want to change that barrier, and we want people to learn about it at an early, in the sort of bachelor's degree level, that there is something which can be pursued as a profession, and that will sort of bring some more young engineers in the in the industry. We are really struggling with the skill gap at the moment in the industry.
Maybe even we could plant the seed even earlier than that.
Yeah, probably in schools.
The schools, the sixth formers, the colleges. So at least they have an idea, or in a few years later, they can think, oh yeah, I've heard of that. I mean, if a student asked you what a facade engineer actually does, how would you summarize that?
Well, I think I would summarize it as in you need to appreciate like when you're in the building, what are you feeling? Like are you feeling? You need to have like that connection with the building. Like when you're too close to the the edge of the building, are you feeling too hot, too cold? So I think that's the starting point. And then what they need to also appreciate is that it's not just like glass and metal, but there could be a lot of articulation of a lot of materials which can make the facade interesting, and also an inclination towards like probably drawing the idea from your head on paper. That's I think that's the ability which we try to instill in the team as well, in the young engineers.
Right.
Like you need to be able to throw your ideas on paper. And so at the school level, I think they need to understand that it's a bit of science, and it's a bit of an art as well. So it's a mix of both.
Okay. Well, I read something you wrote recently which really stood out. You said, I learned by doing, by questioning, by making mistakes, and by backing myself, even when I didn't feel like I fully belonged. What does that sentence really mean to you today?
I think if you wouldn't try, and if you wouldn't fail, you wouldn't learn. And that's the thing which I always have in mind. I probably never know, or I don't think I can say that I know all the answers, but I have the ability to say that I don't know it yet, but I'll find out, and I'll learn from from my surroundings, like whether it's my peers, colleagues I work with, or people in the industry, and I'll find the answer. And it's fine. I think it doesn't show your vulnerability. It's just show your maturity that you're not expected to know everything, and you wouldn't know until you made a mistake. That you and somebody, I think Steve said to me one day, if you haven't made a mistake, that means you haven't tried anything new. So that just stood out with me. And I think I always challenge that I don't think I know everything, but I'm willing to learn and make myself better. So failure for me is success, work in progress.
Where does that feeling really come from you? Where does that stem from?
Where does that stem from? I'm not sure
I mean,
actually.
was
It's
confidence
just,
something you had to build over time?
yeah, I think it just probably started, when I started doing the architecture. As I said, I wanted to do something else, but then I went into something totally, unexpected, and then I just had to learn from that opportunity of learning something new. I didn't know, anything when I started architecture. But then at the end of 5 years, I think I knew something, and I was willing to explore more. And that's how I sort of got instilled with this, that you don't need to know everything,
Sure.
at any time in your life. That learning is the constant. And if you think you've learned everything, that means you've closed your brain, and that's not the right thing.
You've mentioned a couple of significant names that have been quite important to you in your career. Who helped you recognize your own potential?
Certainly not me. I think people realized it before I could. Probably I was the biggest imposter, but I think people just, when they said, "Oh, you should do it," I said, and they said, "Yeah, you should do it. I think you'll be fine, or you'll be great." And I just felt, oh, that they something they saw in me, that made them believe that I could do it. Like it certainly was the case when Chris Aspinall and Saverio Passetto, they both sort of spoke to me about the position of chair of SFE, and I was like, really? And they said, yeah, you always put your hand up, you're willing to do things, so why don't you, we think you will be the good person to lead the SFE. And I was like, okay, if you think so, I'll give it a go. And I think that happened with a lot of other things in my life as well. Like people saw it before me, and I think I just feel that maybe you don't realize it what you've done, but when other people sort of say it to you, it sort of gets reinforced that, oh, I must have done something or shown the ability to do something. That's why they recognize in me.
But something I really liked from your post was your reflection on the people that have supported and championed you throughout your career. You mentioned many of those people were men. So why was that important for you to acknowledge that?
Because I think I don't want to upset anyone here, but I think if people are sort of always jamming the men. Men don't recognize that women have problem, men don't do this or that, and I feel like absolutely not. In my case, I've been supported by them all throughout. In fact, I didn't have a female mentor at all. And like in architecture days in the studio I was working in India as well, like it was the studio director or the principal was I was a male. And then throughout the career I've been sort of promoted by men around me, even at home. Like my husband sort of encouraged me, do this, you'll be fine. And there's always this guidance which comes from men around me in the life. So I just feel that why is that that we need to sort of be men against women. It's not that, it's men with women working together, supporting each other. So I think, yeah, I just find it quite astonishing when people say they've not been supported, whereas in my case I've always been. And in fact, the lack of women in the industry doesn't help, because if there will be more women, they will be obviously coaching, nurturing women as well, because they've had to go through a lot of it, but they
Sure.
have always been supported by men. I mean, at least in my case, I have always been supported by men. And
So
but I want to do more, but I just don't want to do it for women. I want to do it for men as well. Like my colleagues
sure.
in my team, they if you have capability, I think gender is not a bias.
So you've now become someone others look towards for guidance. For someone early in their career who feels they don't have all the answers, what advice would you give them?
You don't need to know all the answers. You don't need to be the most intelligent in the room. I think you need to be comfortable to say, I know this, but I don't know this. And don't be afraid to show your vulnerabilities, because, you will always find a learning. And I think you will always be, you always need to have the confidence to, fail and make mistakes.
Okay.
Because if you're not given that confidence, you will be willing to try and make mistakes and learn from it.
Right. You've spoken about becoming the first woman to lead the Society of Façade Engineering, the SFE. What did that moment mean to you personally?
Felt like, again, I've probably, was not prepared for this. I was asked, and because of my nature of saying yes quite easily to a lot of things, I just accepted. And when Chris sort of announced it on the AGM, and I was like, should I run or what should I do? Because it's coming now. Now there's no looking back. And I think he said she will be the first woman to lead SFE. I felt like, oh my God, this is big, and just didn't register it, at the time when I said yes. But yeah, it felt like a big moment. But I felt, somebody recognized it in me. I should do it well.
Mm-hmm.
I should not do the mistakes. So it felt at that time that there was a pressure on me to be better and to be a, sort of a good example of how, this position needs to be handled with. And, you need to have that responsibility of doing things well so that other
Mm.
people can follow the route, and you make space for others. And
Okay.
similar to myself, people probably can feel that, yes, there is room, there is no glass ceiling.
Mm.
You can go where you want to.
So you're the type of person who will naturally say yes to a new challenge, and then you try and figure it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd say so.
Okay. I mean, I think that's has been Richard Branson's mindset his whole career, and he's done pretty well.
Yeah.
So when you became the chair of the SFE, did you understand the significance at that time?
No, I didn't actually. Again, I didn't know where to start. And, when the first day as a chair, felt like, okay, what do I need to do? And then I just looked back, like, what would Saverio do? What
Mm.
would Chris do? Because those were the two chairs I worked closely during my time at SFE. And I always look back and just try to remember or recall how they did, how they conducted their role.
Mm.
And they did it so well. So, I always felt that, I don't think I can, fill their shoes
Yeah.
in many ways, because they were much more, seasoned. They were much more experienced than I was. But I think what I recognize it, I am not doing it alone. I
Mm.
was doing it with a team of, SFE board members
Mm-hmm.
who supported me in this journey. Even though I was the leader,
Mm.
I just felt that, as a leader, I have to give a direction, but I need support from my team and, cooperation and collaboration with the team.
Mm.
So we did it together during my tenure. It's not just me who did it, but we did it, almost everything was done with the board.
Mm. Okay. I mean, you said being one of the few comes with a responsibility to ensure I'm not the last.
Yeah.
You said that? Okay.
Yeah.
How do we make sure that happens then?
Again, as I said, the pressure is on you not to fail,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to tell yourself you're not failing, you're learning, you're growing.
Mm.
And you need to set the direction, in a way that, you always seem to be motivating others to do, great things. Like, in my role at SFE, I think my purpose was to sort of, make everyone aware that, we need to grow the profession.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we, it's a voluntary role. We don't get paid to
Mm.
do any of the SFE work, but, we have a duty towards the profession.
Mm.
Because, we feel that, sometimes we are not understood well by the industry. So I think that responsibility was, the main theme behind me
Mm.
joining SFE, helping out, creating awareness for the profession. And I think I want to say that, there's room for more people to join SFE. And I think during when I was the chair, we had opened a lot of communication channels. We had a lot of initiatives in the SFE, which sort of created, sort of a perception that, yes, SFE is more about the industry, not about the
Mm.
individuals in the SFE. So people were willing to collaborate. They were much more volunteers during that time.
Mm.
And now, what I see from back then to now, I think more people are interested in working for SFE, which is a
Mm.
really positive change.
Mm.
And it's no credit to me, of course. It was because we had to do so many things so in such a pace that, these things happened and created awareness for SFE and for facade engineering industry
Okay.
by default.
Okay. So Does visibility matter more than people realize?
Yes, yes. Yeah, it does matter. You need to be more visible, more available,
Mm,
and you need to be speaking about challenges more openly. Not everything is hunky dory. Not
mm.
there are good and bad days, but I think you need to be out there to be visible, to be doing things with a purpose.
Okay. You also spoke openly about being a mum of two young children while continuing to progress professionally. Construction often talks about buildings and projects and deadlines. Maybe we don't always talk enough about the people behind them. How have you approached balancing those different parts of your life?
I think it just comes with the responsibility, and basically, you just need to balance your life,
Mm,
your personal life and your work life. You need to have clear boundaries on how you want to manage your life around work and family. You cannot choose one or the other. You have to choose both,
mhm,
and work with a clear mindset that let's say I've done my work and
mm,
I've done it diligently, I've finished it, but now things can wait
mhm,
and I need to go back,
mm,
attend my kids. There have been days when I have not been able to go home on time, but
mm,
I think I had relied on support from my husband, and he has supported me so well in the journey.
mhm,
In fact, when I was on maternity leave, I think we discussed like when I should go back, and he's just said, if you're thinking of going back, you should go back up full time,
mm,
because either you're there or you're not there. You cannot choose the middle.
mm,
Like you cannot have both. So you need to, when you're at work, you should be at work, have your boundaries, and when you are home, you should have that boundaries as well. So yeah, it worked, and with the support of an understanding partner,
mm,
helps.
mm,
And I think there's you just need to manage that balance.
mhm,
And sometimes it's you need to manage, let's say, project deliveries, etc., within reasons. If you are able to make adjustments, and if you have a support back home to look
mm.
after when you are needed, then yeah, it works perfect at that time. And I understand it's not available for everyone, but I have been lucky where I've got that support.
Yeah. How important is it that the leaders show that human side then?
Well, I think we all have these challenges. You need to be empathetic
Mm,
towards other people, and I really understand. Sometimes it's not easy,
mm,
to meet both, but you need to be creating an environment where people are willing to share their problems, their concerns, and be more trustworthy. Like they should have an environment of trust, and
mm,
should feel they're not being judged,
mhm,
or there is no bias.
mm,
I think that's the environment, a nurturing environment, which I tend to create in the team as well. Like we all have
mm,
personal life, and I never encourage anybody to work beyond contracted hours, because that's not fair.
mm,
In fact, if I can put more people to help the project delivery, I'll try to do that,
mm.
and not overload someone or let them burn out, because that's not sustainable in the long term. I never do myself, so why would I expect anyone to do in my team? So yeah, an environment is really necessary in that scenario.
And you've shown that you can build a successful career without sacrificing everything else.
That's right. Yeah, you don't have to choose one or the other. You can do both with boundaries.
Sure. You've been in the industry from multiple perspectives. You mentioned architecture, specialist subcontractors, consultancy, the industry leadership. How different is facade engineering today compared to when you first started?
I think facade engineering has been evolving ever since. I think, as far as I remember, I think back then it was more about like thermal performance, water tightness, but
Mm,
now things are added year after year. Like Grenfell happened, the fire regulations were on the scrutiny,
mm,
and facade engineering was sort of equally under spotlight. And then things happening in the industry almost on an everyday basis, like there's faults, there's failures. But because facade engineering was born out of a gap in the industry, I think we'll see these failures and learnings as we go along.
mm.
Today we talk about so much about embodied carbon, operational carbon, sustainability impact, and I think it's just evolving year after year,
Okay.
and new things are added
Mm,
every time
mm,
there's a change in regulation, and we're thinking constantly challenging the status quo. which
Okay.
is what I said. It makes facade engineering interesting, and there's a lot of things to think about now, and it just evolves.
Are we at the stage where the industry truly appreciates the value of facade engineering and its role?
I'd like to say it is positive since the last decade, but I
Mm.
think there's still room for improvement.
Okay.
I would
What
say,
what do we need to improve?
I think we need to improve the recognition that, facade engineers, bring a sort of perspective, a sort of balanced perspective to the industry.
Mm,
These people are not there because, they're making a standalone profession. It's not about that. It's a collaborative, environment. We all add our value, but I think
mm,
we have limits of our knowledge and we rely on other people's knowledge and experience.
mm,
So I think we are mature enough to recognize that we're not, expert in all fields, but
mm,
I think some professionals probably need to recognize that as well.
mhm,
There have been like occasions where we've been challenged that this is done by an architect or a structural engineer. Why do we need to pay a facade consultant fee?
mm,
And we just say that yes, traditionally, the work was done by an architect or a structural engineer, but they felt themselves that they were not able to
mm,
meet the conflicting requirements. They were only able to solve things in the expertise
mm,
which they had, and you needed someone who understood both.
mm,
And that's why facade engineers were born. So I think
mm,
these days there's much more awareness that facade engineers are important,
mhm.
but I'd like to say there's room for improvement.
Okay.
And I think the failures which we see now in the industry are a result of people doing things beyond their knowledge and experience.
Okay. So we could still do better.
Yes, yeah, there's always room for improvement.
Well, one of the reasons I started the Faces of Facades was because so many people simply didn't know the industry existed. We spoke about visibility and awareness. How do we actually change that?
I think how we should probably recognize that facade is not just about enclosing a building. We should recognize that facade does much more heavy lifting in a built environment. It's it is responsible for keeping people safe, and it is responsible for people keeping the building safe, perform for its purpose and give a long-term value, like asset value for the person who owns the building as well,
Mm,
and yet meet all those conflicting requirements sometimes, and still be able to meet the demands of the ever-changing regulations as well. So I
mm,
think it needs to be like quite robust
mm.
as a skin. It's not just the fancy looking glass and metal building. As I said, there's a lot behind that nice looking facade, which needs to be understood.
And the challenge is to bring the next generation into the industry. So how do we tackle that?
As I said, I think we need to talk more about what we do, how complex it is, what it entails, and what needs to happen. And I think it starts, as we discussed, it
Mm,
should start early in the school age,
mm,
perhaps, just to make people excited
mm,
that what they see in the building is doing a lot more than they think. And I think the other way to introduce is like to have apprentices schemes in the employers, like show them how things are done, maybe take them to site and show them how they are things are installed, how things are built. Maybe take them to a glass factory, just make them interested to tell them like it's a lot more than what you think. And I think structured education is the key, in facade engineering, and that needs to change and improve. Another thing is like you need mentoring and sponsorship in the industry for young engineers, and you need to support them in the journey on becoming the future facade engineers of the industry. There's a brain drain issue which is happening, like a lot of experienced and seasoned people in the industry will probably leave at some point, and that
mm.
knowledge which they'll take with them is going to leave a massive gap. So we all have responsibility to do that knowledge transfer and elevate the profession.
Well, hearing the stories of people such as yourself and other leaders in the industry, I think is also quite a valuable tool in helping people realize that there's a fantastic world out there in facades and there's great opportunities for people, which we may be losing out on. Yes, the buildings are complex and interesting, but the people really sell it, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's a human factor to it. Yes.
Looking ahead over the next 10 years, what excites you most about how the industry is evolving and where it's going?
I think it's as I said, it's evolving every year, but things are added, time after time. And now digitalization, use of AI, all being talked about. And I think it will change the way we work as well. It won't it won't eliminate the human factor or the engineering factor, but I think we need to utilize or leverage these technology to make our work efficient and better. So I think that's the future which I see in our industry. It's not about like getting rid of people in the industry. Like I don't think AI can do that in our industry. It's probably too distant for us. Maybe closer to other industries, but not for us. But we need to learn and leverage these tools to our benefit to make our lives easier and efficient.
Okay, well, I think we've covered quite a lot of information. I'm going to sort of take it down a notch and just move on to 5 fast questions. Outside of work, what helps you most sort of switch off and recharge?
Music, listening
Okay.
to some nice music, and these days I've been listening to a lot of like, how do I say, religious meditating music
Hmm.
at the moment, just to keep my mind off of distractions.
Is that a spiritual thing or
Yeah, I think it
just the
is.
tone?
I think I'm sort of inclined towards like becoming like more spiritual,
Mm.
towards, I think, Lord Krishna. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's it's a god in
Hmm.
Hinduism,
Hmm.
and I just like to learn about his teachings.
Okay.
So I listen to the music and read about the Bhagavad Gita
So
and
listening
the
to the
teachings.
music and believing in
Yes,
something more powerful than us.
that's right. There's something mystic. I'm
Yeah.
sure there is or something out there which keeps it running.
Okay. Well, who's had the biggest influence on your life or career?
I can't weight it, but I think people who have probably spoke about in this interview. But I think the biggest support is probably my family,
Hmm.
who, because I'm here in the UK because of them. Like, they trusted me
Mm.
to take that step and supported me in that journey. So I think, yeah, family is the probably biggest support, and then
Mm.
all people around me, who believed in me, whether it's Steve.
Mm.
Mosey, who was the head of facades before me, or Saverio, or Chris, or network which I've built up over these years.
Mm.
I think I'm making more friends in the industry, I hope.
Having
And
that family support then, it was
that's
a
right.
sort of security blanket for you. I mean, you mentioned when you come over, you weren't worried about failing because you knew you could always go back.
Go back. Yeah, that's right. That's
So
right.
it's a good security, I guess. What's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
But I think I mentioned it before, like, try. Don't be
Okay,
afraid to fail
don't be
and
afraid
make
to fail.
mistakes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you did mention it. Yeah. What
Yeah.
what and what gives you sort of hope that the next generation entering this industry?
There is plenty of room to learn, and I think you will never feel bored in your day-to-day life. It's no work or
Mm.
no project will bring you the same problems. It will bring you different problems, and you'll continuously learn and grow.
Okay. So just finally, if you could finish the sentence, the future of facade engineering, what does it need more of?
I think it needs, again, I will bring it back to the learning piece. I think
Hmm.
it needs more of an openness that, things will not work out the way you think, but I think you will learn something new in this and you'll make your next solution better.
Okay. All right. Well,
So
Remy,
yeah, be open to fail.
okay, that's good advice.
Yeah.
um, Remy, thank you. What I've really enjoyed about this conversation is that although we're talking about facades, it's really much more than just buildings. It's about people, it's about careers, it's about opportunities and leadership and creating space for others. And that's why I've created the Faces of Facades, why it really exists, to share the people and the stories behind the industry. So thank you very much for joining me.
No, thank you for having me. It was really pleasure to talk about it, and a reflection on the last 16, 17 years of the life has been really like insightful as well. I didn't think about it until now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers.